Jay Falconio here with Remco Real Talk, and I'm here with Anton Kaminsky from Kaminsky Law. Anton, thanks for coming in.
Happy to be here, man.
Appreciate it. So, little background, Anton was the guy I called when I realized that I needed to put in writing what we did at Remco, and I'm really happy I called him.
Thanks, I appreciate it. It's always good to get good feedback.
So it's good to be protected too, right? So, Anton, I heard you speak earlier on one of your other shows, one of your other podcasts, that your first question to business owners are, do you have an agreement?
Yeah, for sure. And that's funny because a lot of people will come to me and say, hey, I have this business, it's me and my partner, and we have this issue. And my first question to them is, well, what's your agreement say?
How many have an agreement, percentage-wise?
Hard to estimate. I'd say less than half small informal businesses, when it's two buddies starting a company, almost never. When it's something more serious where somebody's putting in a lot of money, you'll start to see agreements.
Yeah. And then how much harder is it? Because I think from like just overall experience, working backwards when you don't have an agreement after years of being in business.
There's a lot of hurdles with that, man. There's a lot of hurdles. What winds up happening is when you start a business in the beginning, you have a rosy colored glasses kind of approach to life, right? We're going to be 50-50. We're going to do the work. We're going to make this $1 million company. It's going to be great. What usually winds up happening, I want to say always, but I probably shouldn't say always as a lawyer, right? But what usually winds up happening is it's never 50-50. So somebody puts in more time, somebody puts in more money, somebody's got more clients, somebody's got, more skin in the game. Sure. Somebody's taking more vacations, somebody's, leaving the office earlier.
Yeah.
And so when you put everything in writing in the beginning, it's easier to say, hey, look, this is what we agreed to and this is what we're doing. When, you come a year, 2 years into this business and now you're like, all right, well, let's put this in writing that we're 50-50. Now all this resentment starts to come out. Right. Well, you leave the office at 4:00 and I put in an extra 30 grand that I never got back,
I can't imagine all the dirty laundry that you get hit with, like all the information that you probably don't need.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because, as an attorney, I'm really supposed to look out for my client's best interests. And so in that scenario, when two guys come to me and say, hey, we want to paper an agreement when they're already fighting with each other about something, it's really hard to do that in a way where you're not going to have a conflict. And
Sure.
So you're going to have to either represent the company and then you kind of give them the neutral, hey, this is what agreements typically say. And then you guys kind of agree to the terms, or you have to represent one of them and look out for their one person's best interests, or, you have to do a waiver of conflict where, I'm not advising you guys as to how this is done, but that's really not best practice.
Yep, absolutely. So just for those tuning in, employment law would be your main focus.
No, I don't think that's accurate.
Okay.
We do a lot of shareholder disputes. We do a lot of shareholder representation. We do a lot of small business, right? Small business is a better way to put it.
I like that.
We represent, any small business from startup to multi-million dollars in revenue per year. And then we do, it's almost like the term that I've used is we're like an outsourced in-house GC. Right?
I love
so
that.
like when a company gets big enough, they hire GC that sits around in the office, gets paid a lot of money, and, only gets involved sometimes.
Yeah.
This way you're paying us kind of hourly to do that role. So whatever you need.
And when it comes to, we've been doing business for a while, and I could tell you when you actually have the agreements ready to go, how much more confident you are and how quickly you can actually and safely scale your business. Some of the ones that you worked on for us have gotten us to a point where, I can't imagine not having them, right?
Yeah. And you start with a good base, right? So you have some sort of basic document that you then can say, hey, we're going to change it like this for this person. Or, you remember how we did it for this guy? Well, we want to do it differently for whatever reason.
Sure.
And sometimes we get brought in and these people have no agreements with their employees, with their contractors, with their vendors. And they say, can you take a look at this? And that's an uphill battle, just like it is with the shareholder thing, because, you've been dealing with somebody for months, years, whatever. And now they're like, put all this in writing, and now there's pushback there. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't want to put that in paper.
Yeah. I'm glad you said small business. I mean, the heart of what we do, I would say over 90% of what we do is small business insurance. So we deal with these business owners day in and day out on the insurance side. And, I know our agents know that, if legality comes into it, that you guys are really our go-to for that. With that being said, the world's changed too, right? So like just revisiting our handbook over the past couple of years, there's different holidays that we now acknowledge, and COVID, right? Like, how did we deal with that? Did you find your practice or the clients that you've been dealing with having to shapeshift just based on the past maybe 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is reactionary. You kind of change things when you get smacked in the face a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And so you guys are doing great. You're proactive in some instances, and a lot of people are proactive. But yeah, I mean, we see that clients come in, they want to change this, take a look at that. You really should be doing that on a semi-regular basis, maybe annually or every couple of years, because it's not until you get into some sort of litigation where they're like, well, let me see your policies and procedures. And then you show them the policies and it doesn't speak to that, or it's just the opposite of what you did.
Sure.
Right. And so you gotta be kind of up on that.
So your eye, though, I mean, I even had, we utilized resources together, and you've helped me look at other agreements that are totally outside of our agency, but just your trained eye for being able to pick out that is it wording then? Is that the stuff that you really focus on?
Yeah, to some extent. You know what it is? We do a lot of litigation. So our primary focus is not drafting agreements. Our primary focus is when we're suing people or we're defending people that are getting sued. And we could talk about the insurance piece of that ad nauseum if you want. But
let's go.
Our primary focus on that is, hey, how do I draft a document that's going to be clear enough that's going to avoid the lawsuit? And so when you're asking, is it the language? Is it the terms? I'm trying to make a document, or I'm trying to help you make a document that is very clear in what it says. Yeah. This is what you're supposed to do. This is what I'm supposed to do. If there's a disagreement, this is what we do.
Because half the time you're reading these things and I'm like, who uses this language? It looks like it's written by like some sort of English literature mixed with like some Egyptian hieroglyphics. Like the wording, it's like, what does this even mean? I was like, great. What are you saying?
That's how we stay employed, man.
Yeah. And then I'm like, oh, well, I don't understand this. I'm clearly not competent enough. I got to call Anton to decipher the code.
Right. That's how we keep a job. No.
But on the inverse side, and it makes perfect sense, the documents that you're writing, you're just trying to make them clear.
Yeah. And you also know that look, you can enforce a document that's on a napkin, right? You can enforce a document that's 1 sheet of paper, 2 sheets of paper. It's not really the question becomes, well, we didn't write about this. So what did we mean about that? Sure. And so that's why you get these agreements that are like 20, 30 pages when everyone's like, why can't I just have a 2-page agreement? Well, there's a lot of like additional terms at the end that lawyers put in.
Yeah.
And those terms are actually important. And if you wanted to sit here for 10 hours, I could explain each and every one of them to you. But you don't need that, right? I mean, it's really about how are you going to resolve disputes? Where are you going to resolve disputes? What happens? Does winner get their fees? Mm-hmm. There's for instance, an entire agreement clause, right? It's just this clause that says, hey, everything that we negotiated is in this document. And so that you can't later show up and say, well, I know we wrote this agreement, we all signed it, but you also told me this, right? And so like there's a whole lot of like things that have been litigated before and resolved before that kind of make it in their way into like one paragraph of nonsense. I'm
always thinking that there's going to be like one page or like one sentence somewhere that's just going to debunk everything I'm reading on all 30 pages.
Yeah, that's the best. Right. You have like a 30-page agreement at the end. It says notwithstanding anything to the foregoing, everything's different.
The foregoing, everything you read is wrong.
Everything you read doesn't apply. It's actually this one line at the end.
Yeah, so that's good. Before we hopped on, you mentioned you're going through scaling your firm, and you've brought on some really great talent. You want to talk about kind of just what that's been like lately?
Oh man, that's difficult. So we have I hired, or we've grown. There's now 2 additional lawyers working for me, Aubrey and Jake. Aubrey does employment. You were asking about that. Mm-hmm. So she does a lot of our employment contracts, a lot of our employment litigation, whether it's representing an employee that hasn't been paid correctly or has been, mistreated, or on the other side, representing companies to help them put these agreements in place. And then, if there's litigation or a lawsuit arising from that, she'll do that. She also does construction litigation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So she's actually great. If you talk to her about like how a house needs to be built. She's like a pro.
Wow.
And
Okay,
like,
good to know.
Yeah, she's done a lot of roofing cases. She's done a lot of like just general construction defect, I'm trying to think like
Deal with any of the solar company roofing? Because
yes.
well, it's so funny. I didn't even know that this was something you focused on, because I would say there's one agent in particular that we brought on over the past year who only does our home and auto, and he's got a really, really strong focus in Jersey with the wholesalers, the flippers, the roofers, the solar. The amount of back and forth between these roofing and solar companies is outrageous.
Yes. You know what? And we're seeing a lot of that too, especially in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Is that because there's like some sort of credit?
It's the best credit in the country.
Oh, really?
Yeah. New Jersey, the strongest state, and I think out there in Cali might be up there as too, but Jersey's the state that's getting the most credit.
You know what? That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I've been driving around New Jersey and I see all these like huge solar fields, just
Yep.
like it's like a field full of solar panels.
And they're older homes historically. So yeah, so we see that every day, but that's good to know. I'm definitely going to bring that back to the agents.
What kind of cases do you guys see?
Well, mainly it's the roofers, I guess the insurance companies who are not writing homes because of the age of the roof. And then they're basically contracting roof companies to install the roof, but then the solar companies are then paying the roofers to sell the solar.
Yeah.
It's like a double dip.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I definitely want to look at that. We actually just got a case. I'm not sure if we're taking it or not. Aubrey would have to talk about it, but it seems interesting because it seems like there's some underhanded sales tactics too.
That's what it is. Yeah.
There's like a lot of like, hey,
They're basically getting free roofs. So these insurance companies, they're not writing the property. So they say, oh, you need to get a new roof. All right. Then the kind of the solar and the roofers got this like under the table deal going on.
Interesting.
It's very crazy.
I can't wait to get to the bottom.
We're gonna catch them all. We're
Yeah.
gonna get them all.
I'm a big fan of trying to
Well,
figure those
from the
kinds of
insurance
things out.
standpoint too, it makes our lives really difficult because in Pennsylvania, and then we'll reference Jersey, but in Pennsylvania, flat roofs. You've
Right,
both
right.
heard
Yeah,
those.
I
Like
know
now
what that is, of
that's
course.
something that is almost impossible. We have to go to our excess and surplus lines to be able to write it, and they're crazy prices. But now it's these Jersey roofs are the focus. So from a broker's perspective, we have these relationships with these 80 companies, and we have some companies who just wake up one day and say, "Well, no more flat roofs. Oh, no more old. No more.
Not insuring them.
Nope, they're pulling out.
That's
So
crazy.
or nope, no roofs over 20 years old. Whereas like for the past 20 years, they've been writing them.
Right.
So it puts us in a position where we then can use it. I like to look at it as glass half full, not half empty.
Mhm.
It allows us to flex the muscle of we have all these carriers, and now we can do what brokers do, and we can say, well, Travelers doesn't want you anymore. We're taking you over to Liberty Mutual.
Sure.
And then our customers end up seeing kind of how we actually do what we do. They
Yeah.
still think, they look at Remco and they say, you're Travelers, you're Liberty Mutual. It's like, no, we're the broker in between that's representing
helping you
these
find the
companies.
best.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So with everything going on with the captives, State Farm right now, a whole of California being on fire, all their pullouts and stuff like that, it allows us to educate our clients.
That's great.
Yeah. But rewinding back, with the construction law, I think that's great because there's such a need for that too.
Yeah, and you know what I find that I think is a huge need in your space, and I'm happy that I'm here to talk about it, is a lot of times you're gonna get, or not you're gonna get, I see a lot of people that have insurance, right?
Mhm.
But they don't have insurance for the thing that happened.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And
it's
it's
true.
and you would think that they would have insurance for the thing that happened because that's all they do.
It's really hard to work yourself out of that hole too. I love when we're able to look at a document and say, you're a roofer, but you're written for a plumber.
Yeah.
Or you have all these expensive furs or all this jewelry, but your personal properties is under 25,000.
That's what I see, and I see it when you
Yeah.
get sued, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
So I'll have somebody that's like a remodeler, for instance, right?
Mhm.
And they fix windows, right?
Yeah.
Like just for instance, or they install windows. Sorry, they do remodeling, they install windows. And they did new construction. They did windows on new construction for somebody.
Yeah.
And then what happens is, that house leaks. It might have nothing to do with the windows whatsoever.
Yeah.
Right? But the GC gets sued,
Mhm.
and then the GC sues every single subcontractor that they hired on the job,
Trickle down.
which now includes my window guy.
Yep.
And then, we go to the insurance company and we say, hey, look, we have insurance. Go ahead and cover this. And they're like, oh, well, we don't cover new construction window installs. We only cover remodeling window installs because that's what you told us you do.
And you know what the repercussion is on our end? I mean, look, we have E&O insurance as well, and people make mistakes, but you're really quickly going to lose a reputation as an insurance provider if you're writing policies incorrectly.
Yeah, and I think you could set yourself aside by saying, "Hey, we actually, pay attention to what you do.
Yeah,
we understand what you do, and then we'll write you a policy that's maybe not the cheapest policy, but it's the right policy."
Exactly. And then we live in a day and age where, these policies, they just live on your phone. Like there's no, some carriers aren't even mailing out the policies anymore. So it's like, what am I buying? I'm buying something out of fear so that one day I'm going to have to use it. And I pay my bills every month just so I don't have a rate increase. And then I need to use it. And then what I need to use is written wrong. It's really hard to work yourself backwards.
Yeah. And the other thing is a lot of people don't even go to the broker, right? They'll just go and get a policy.
I know.
Because they think, I do a lot of cemetery cases, right?
Okay.
I don't know if we ever talked about this, but I do a lot of cemetery cases where you're suing a cemetery or funeral home, right? And you're suing them for, improper burial or messing up something along the lines of the burial or not having enough grave space to do what you got to do.
I wondered what you can get sued for because okay.
Yeah. And so ask me how many times I've seen a funeral home policy that doesn't cover burial negligence. And I'm like, well, guess what? In Pennsylvania, it says in the law that a funeral director has to be present at the burial. They have to.
Interesting.
And so if you have a funeral director policy that doesn't cover burial, you're just exposing yourself every single day.
We might have encountered this actually last week, but this is going to be the saddest part. This is going to be the saddest part of the show. You ready? It was a pet cemetery.
Oh.
So when that came in, he was like, I got a pet cemetery. But he wasn't covered for the burial part of it. And I was like, how does this make sense?
It doesn't make sense.
So if someone were to fall into the hole or something during the event, right? Yeah. So I was just like,
I guess it's two different policies, right? I get the slip and fall, somebody fell on your property.
Yes.
That insurance, but you don't have insurance for your operation.
For your operation. That's the focus that this one was in particular. We were able to take care of it. But when we looked at it, it doesn't take long, especially our trained agents, they can see that. So you bring up a good point. There's so many easy ways to do things in life now where you just Google something and you get generally, all your answers that everyone who pays Google millions of dollars are at the top, right? So how do you differentiate yourself? You've been doing a great job with it, the Google reviews, getting those testimonials. But I really encourage, if it's not Remco, if we're not your broker, please deal with the broker.
Yeah.
The day, as a business owner, I would say, even on home and auto, but the days of just dealing with a provider who only sells one product, for those listening, that's State Farm, that's Allstate, that's Geico, that's Liberty Mutual, that's Comparion, that's Goosehead. Look, I'm happy to call them out because they're trying to catch up to the broker model. A lot of these companies now are starting to get more carriers. The problem that I'm seeing is a lot of these captive agents who have always been kind of this one-trick pony, they don't know how to use the markets. So they're writing a lot of really incorrect policies. Mm-hmm. Now they have 20 carriers, right? And they're bragging, I have these 20 carriers, but they don't know how to use them.
Yeah, and you know what? From a small business perspective, from the lawyer's perspective, use a broker also because, it's a cover your ass thing.
Yeah.
Right? Because if I'm a small business and I went to a broker and I explained to the broker exactly what I needed in writing, whatever it was, and then the broker didn't get me that policy, well, now I have another pocket to collect after.
Sure.
If my insurance company doesn't cover me, now I could call the broker. And I'm sure you guys have seen it too. Everybody's seen it.
Absolutely.
But you call the broker and you say, hey, man, I told you this is what I needed. You got me insurance that doesn't cover this.
Exactly.
And so, that's I feel like that should be a great selling point for you guys.
Yeah, we try to educate. We try to educate, not bash, but it's really just making sure that, and there's been an influx, right? There's the home and auto product was very popular, still is very popular, but it's a dog-eat-dog product. My uncle dropped me for $10 savings a month. I didn't invite him to Thanksgiving. No, I'm just kidding. He still was there. But there's no loyalty. He's my uncle.
Right,
He's like, I'm taking my business elsewhere because there's no savings here. If there's no loyalty in that product, there is loyalty in business insurance. And I can tell you that a lot of people who are missing and getting frustrated with the disloyalty in the home and auto product and the rate increases, they're migrating themselves into business insurance. And I just want to make sure that, they're getting properly educated on how to actually place it.
Yeah, and I think from a business perspective and as a lawyer talking, you really should be paying attention to your insurance. I tell people that all the time. There's two main things that I tell people when they have, when you start a business in your first, I don't know, 2-3 years where assuming you have a business that's like relatively successful or even moderately successful, right? You're making, maybe 5 figures in your first year, maybe low 6 figures in your second year if you're having a good year. There's nothing that will throw you off like a lawsuit, right? It'll just completely destroy your business. We used to say litigation kills. And
Get that
it
on
really
a t-shirt
does.
and start wearing it around.
Well, no, it really does, because think about it. Think about how much time you need to dedicate to it, right? And then the other piece of it is, what if you don't have insurance that covers the thing that should cover? Now they're looking at the company. They're looking to collect against the company, in its operate, like from your profits. They want money.
Yeah.
Or if there's not enough profits in your company, now they're looking at the owners, right? And so there's this concept of the corporate veil that people hear. They're like, oh, if I open a company, it's going to protect me. And people hear that and they believe it. But the thing that they don't know is one of the exemptions from the corporate veil is you're underinsured.
Interesting.
And so if you're, think about it. If you run a company and you're exposing either your employees or, the people that you're working for to real harm, for that, real harm could be compensated by millions of dollars hypothetically, and you have $100,000 of insurance, you're underinsured, man.
Pretty much all the time.
Yeah,
that's a good point, and that's a really good perspective to look at it. So with the construction, construction law is something new. Were there any other focuses that kind of just recently came about at your firm, or?
So our main focus is really our small business. So it's really just anything that we deal with. So we deal with a lot of like vendor disputes and business to business disputes. We deal with a lot of shareholder disputes. So if there's 2 partners or 3 partners or 5 partners and somebody's either been oppressed they want to be bought out at fair market value, or on the flip side of that, right, is like you have this one shareholder that's not coming to work or trying to start a competing business or something like that. Now you got to get that guy out of there, or lady. And so that's kind of our core focus. And then we do those cemetery cases, which are just a whole completely different aspect, a whole different animal.
Interesting.
And that's really our main kind of
your bread
focus.
and butter. Yeah. So when it comes to getting, I guess, a company that's never been evaluated, do you have your resources for that?
Yeah. So, and that's what I started saying. So Aubrey does kind of the employment aspect of it, right? And then we have Jake and Andrew, Jake's a lawyer, Andrew's still studying to be a lawyer, but they deal with a lot of the shareholder issues and a lot of the contracts. And so we are able to look at your contracts. We're able to put together contracts for you guys. And then we're able to, whether that's between or among shareholders, whether it's with employees, whether it's with third-party businesses. And then if there's ever litigation that arises because of these contracts, it's nice to see. I hate when my clients get involved in litigation, but it's nice to see when, now we're enforcing the contract that we wrote.
That's gotta feel good.
And it's like, I know that this is going to work, right? It's
So there's a beautiful level of confidence in you, but that's seeing your product, and that's your business full circle.
Yeah.
There's got to be something, and I understand why you don't want to, wish that upon your clients, but you're actually putting to use the words.
Yeah. And we've thought this through. And now you've breached it, and we're going to pursue you the way that we said we would.
Yeah. So most of your cases, do they take place locally, like when you actually have to pursue litigation?
Yeah. So most of the litigation that we do is either Philadelphia, Bucks County, or Montgomery County.
Okay.
Sometimes the surrounding counties, we take a lot less work. We have stuff in Chester County. We have stuff in Delaware County. But we try not to take work too far out, because then you get a long travel time.
Yeah,
you don't want to, you don't want to charge clients for that. And then we do New Jersey. We also do federal court. So we do federal court in Philadelphia. There's the Eastern District, which is right in on Market Street. And then the New Jersey federal courts are actually pretty convenient, because there's one in Trenton and there's one in Camden.
Nice.
So they're both kind of close.
How long can one of these go? Give me the longest one and the
longest one.
Shortest
Man,
one.
I have cases that started in 2019 that are still not fully wrapped up.
I mean, at that point, everyone wants it to be
over.
That's
that's why I say
right?
litigation kills, man. Litigation kills. And look, there's 2 eyes of thought on it, right? The one eye of thought, or I guess the frame of reference, is somebody owes you hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. Sure. You're going to pursue that to the end of the world, right?
Yeah.
And so it doesn't matter how long it takes. It doesn't matter how much it costs. So
I would think that to most, though, the cost would be the end factor for most. They would say, hey.
And we try to avoid it, right?
Yeah.
But you get into this risk reward analysis, right? Like if you owe somebody $1 million and you spend $100,000 trying to get out of it, and you wind up in an agreement where you owe them only $400,000, well, that's money well spent.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
and vice versa. Somebody
Sure.
owes you $1 million and you spend $100,000 chasing it, and then you go and get $500,000, $700,000 at the end of that, rather than zero. That's also worth it.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I mean, that's why lawyers exist. But unfortunately, and I see this a lot, you get lawyers that'll just, they delay. They'll like appeal things that really shouldn't be appealed.
Yeah.
That will just, that an appeal adds a year and a half.
Wow.
Right to it.
Okay. So not just like a, hey, I'll see you next week type deal.
No, right. Because, well, you're appealing to the superior court usually, or to the, the next court level. And there's briefing schedules. It takes, 60 days for these people to write something. Then it takes 60 days for you to respond. Lawyers ask for extensions. Now it's another 30 days. So now there's 6 months right there just gone.
Do you find that the system was more efficient when you just started, or do you feel like it's getting more efficient or getting more complex?
No, I don't think it's changed drastically. Without speaking ill of any specific courts or any specific judges, I think federal court moves a lot faster than state court.
Okay.
And then state court's a lot more sympathetic than federal court. So if you are a individual that's got a personal injury case of some sort, you want to be in state court, and you really shouldn't care how long it takes.
Yeah.
Right. If you're a business and you're trying to litigate over an agreement or some, relatively straightforward argument, you want to be in federal court typically, because that's going to move it along, and the judges are going to be a lot more no nonsense kind of people.
Interesting.
Typically.
Why is there so much competition on the injury law side? Like, you cannot go down 95 without seeing at least 10 of these.
Crazy?
Isn't that like, I'm waiting to see a picture of you up there. Like, let's just...
man, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. Everybody keeps trying to get me to do it. I'm not doing it.
Well, yeah. Just why is there so much competition in that space?
Personal injury law, I feel like, is a interesting area of the law, because as a lawyer, you're swinging for the fences, right? And so you're gonna do a lot of these like little, slip and falls and fender bender cases where you're suing over, let's say, $0 to $50,000.
Okay.
And you're gonna do a lot of those, and it becomes a volume business because you want to get all those phone calls, right? And then if you do 100 of those, maybe you get 10 that are $1 million cases, right?
Got it.
Or I don't know what their numbers
are.
So
it's more of a stacking nickels type product.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure there's a lot. I mean, these lawyers do get big cases. I mean, like
when some of these firms, I mean, they're so big. First, like Ponley Hockey, they can afford 3 billboards just to ask a question. Are you injured? Ponley Hockey, 4 billboards.
Isn't that crazy? That's
like, are you injured? Like, and I know that they're affiliated with the Philadelphia Eagles and all that kind of stuff, but it's like, it's got to be a volume game, because they're like that name.
Yeah, and I don't know about Ponley Hockey specifically, but a lot of these firms that you see billboards for are national firms.
Yes.
So I don't know about Ponley Hockey. It's and I don't want to defame anybody, but I think like Morgan & Morgan is like all over the country.
Yeah, Top Dog.
Top Dog's all over the country, I think. And look, I mean, again, it's as I understand it, to the best of my knowledge, it's a volume game.
Yeah.
Because if you see some of these Philadelphia firms that are like the big personal injury firms in Philly, they're not even on those billboards anywhere.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, they're not there.
Noted.
Yeah.
I mean, the product, the injury product, and I know I will transition, but it's like, it does hit home, because I had some family members who, went that route, and they ended up getting properly taken care of. But I guess the compensation that they were going to get before they actually went and seek consultation from a lawyer, it was nothing. So I felt good about being able to pay your medical bills.
No, I'm not.
It's just a product that I think
what they do.
No, not at all. I think just it's a product that everyone can like see immediate value in. It's like, I'm hurt, I can't pay my bills, I can't work.
Yeah, and you know what's funny you bring that up, because look, if you get hurt, right, you're like, I'm going to go to a lawyer right away. Yeah, it's like the first thing
exactly.
You think of, right?
Yeah.
But when you're starting a business, most people are like, nah, I
don't need
myself.
an agreement. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It registers with the average individual so much quicker, where it's like, it's so true.
Yeah, Yeah. A personal injury lawyer is going to fix this for me.
Let's flip the dynamic, the paradigm around. I started a business. I need an agreement. I'm like, hey, you know, well, you know, and then it's like just on TV, like soap opera television, you got Judge Judy, you got it sells.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about that is when you look at agreements, a lot of times, if you know, you asked how many people have an agreement versus don't, and that's like, you know, there's this small faction of people that have an agreement, right? So let's just hypothetically say less than 50%.
Sure.
Of those less than 50% that have an agreement, how many people read their agreement before signing it?
I'm guilty. No, I just was like, I trust you. No.
Right. Well, how many people took it to a lawyer, right?
No, that's a good point.
And if you're on the receiving end of that, right? And, you know, we tell people this all the time too, consult with a lawyer. I don't want to spend the money, right? But like, let's just say somebody's offering you a job that's like a 6-figure job where you're like an executive at some company, or, you know, you're going to do some, you know, meaningful, and I don't mean that to say that other people's jobs aren't meaningful, but I mean, like, you get access to their trade secrets, you get access to their, you know, customer lists. And you're going to go and sign an agreement and you hear, oh, they're paying me $250,000. Right.
Sounds good.
That sounds great. Thanks, guys. Bye. But you don't read that you just signed like a 2-year non-compete, 2-year non-solicit.
And we run into that all the time in the
every single
space.
person that you called while you were here is our client now, right? Like, people don't read that.
Yeah.
And you really should, and you should take it to a lawyer.
Yeah. And that comes up a lot. I mean, the non-compete is something that, just from, I guess, an HR standpoint, looking for good talent, trying to hire other agents from other companies, I've never really seen it upheld, to be honest with you. I've never really seen an agent that we hired, you know, from, let's just say, you know, State Farm or something like that, you know, get a call and get a lawsuit from the other company saying, hey, you poached this client. Like, I don't understand what that non-compete, like, if you're an insurance agent and you're licensed in the state of Pennsylvania to conduct business, and you go to a different firm, like, you know, naturally that's hard. It's hard to defend, and it's hard not to partake
disagree with you.
Okay. All right, let's hear
it. Well, first of all, I've seen insurance agent broker agreements, specifically insurance agent broker agreements, get upheld.
Okay.
I think it's important to distinguish a non-compete from a non-solicit.
Okay.
Okay. A non-compete just says, I'm not going to do this business somewhere else, right? Or I'm not going to do this like service somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right. And so non-competes, there's that FTC rule. It's, you know, being litigated. I don't even know where it's ended up at this point. Again, that's an Aubrey question. But generally speaking, a non-compete is only enforced if there's like a really good reason for it. And I'll give you a good reason for it. Let's just say I invented the formula for, you know, this new bottled water, you know, it's energy water or whatever. I invented the formula. You and I invented the formula together, or maybe I invented it. You worked for me. You know the access to the formula. It's reasonable, if you had access to this formula, that you wouldn't be able to go and start an energy water company.
That makes sense.
Like, within some period of time, if we needed to change the formula or something.
That makes sense.
Right. So if you had access to the secret sauce, it makes sense that you wouldn't be able to just go copy that. Right. That's a non-compete. A non-solicit is, in a non-compete in your industry, in my industry, they don't really make a lot of sense. Right. Because
I think that's what I was referencing. So you broke that down. The non-compete's different than the non-solicit. So I meant, if you worked for State Farm and then you started working for a different firm, and then you were not allowed to sell insurance again in the state of Pennsylvania,
that wouldn't be enforced.
That's what I was referencing. I was like, are you supposed to now go work at Starbucks?
Right.
Like, what do you know?
They're not going to enforce.
But a non-solicit, that's more actively going after with the intention of bringing over.
Right.
Or, that makes sense.
And I've seen the non-solicit in your space get enforced every time. Not every time, but all the time.
But it should. That should. The non-compete, I meant, you know, are you supposed to drop your license and pick up a new profession?
Yeah, there's some spaces where the non-compete makes sense, and it's usually in a relatively limited and a targeted thing.
Retail, like you said, copyrighted things.
Yeah, like you know, if you're my head of marketing, right, you shouldn't be able to go work for another law firm and become the head of marketing there, and then just do the exact same thing.
Yeah,
right. There should be some sit out period.
No, that makes sense. I'm glad you clarified that. The difference between the non-compete and non-solicit.
But non-solicit, it makes a lot of sense because, hey, you know, I paid you all this money for 2 years, 3 years, for however long you work for me, to, you know, go market, to go to trade shows, to go play golf, to go do this, to go do that, right? To go to events. And all these, this Rolodex that you've gathered over this time while I was paying you to do it and paying for the events, right? Now you're going to just go call on that Rolodex somewhere else for somebody else? No, I should get the benefit of that.
I agree, and I understand. I guess it gets a little murky with if you're not actively calling on those people, what if those relationships just follow you naturally?
And that's another thing, right? And this is why you should have agreements, and this is why these agreements should be crystal clear. That's the important part, right? Is so like, well, what does your agreement say about that?
Yeah.
Right? Because for instance, let me give you an example. You hire a real broker, right? And that broker has a book of business that's followed him to you. And now, let's just say it's a $100,000 a year book, whatever it may be.
Sure.
But for the last 5 years that he's worked for you, you've helped him service that book. You've helped him go meet with these people. You've helped him, whatever, take them out to lunches, take them out to games. I don't know.
Sure.
What you can,
no, it's
whatever
a
you guys
very
do to
realistic
market.
example that you're giving.
And so, for 5 years, you've paid for him servicing those people.
Sure.
So then the question becomes, do you get any benefit from that after they leave? And then the question is, what does the agreement say?
Yeah.
Some people's agreement says, hey, you can't, now that I've serviced them for all this time, maybe you have to pay me a piece of that when you leave.
That's interesting.
Even though it was your book that you brought over.
And these are all
here.
Things, again, they could all be put in the agreement so
And
that it's clear. Yeah,
and
right.
They should be.
And I guess based on the industry that you are servicing, or based on the industry that you're providing, legal counsel for, everyone has their own different versions of.
Everyone has their own agreement, right? I mean, like even with you guys, for instance, if you have a broker that's got, a $5 million book of business and he wants to come over to you and says, hey, I got this $5 million book of business. It's mine. I don't care, right? If I stay, if I go, it's mine. I want that in my agreement. If you want the $5 million book of business bad enough, fine, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Or maybe not. Or maybe he comes in with this $50,000 book of business. You're like, I'm not putting that in there. I don't care about your book of business. Right?
That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, it has to be in the agreement. Have the agreement.
And it should be clear.
It should be clear. Yes, it should be clear.
And if you're a guy that is thinking about taking his book of business somewhere else, and you have a $5 million book of business, you should be thinking about protecting that book of business so that you don't just sign some agreement that gives that book of business to somebody else for no value whatsoever.
That's important. Yeah, absolutely. And in an industry where I guess it could be related to so many different careers or different industries in general.
It works for so many different.
It's industries. So much in different industries, and it's just putting that and making that clear, because at the end of the day, humans, it's relationship product too. So
yeah,
to hold accountable though an individual who is in a new position. How would you be able to, I guess, legally pursue somebody reaching out to somebody for another service if they came from another book of business?
What do you mean?
Like, how could you
be more specific?
So so breaking down, so if and a broker came over to the agency, but somebody within his old book of business just naturally followed him, is he supposed to say no?
It depends what his agreement says.
But okay.
Right? It really does. There's interesting developing case law, and we actually just dealt with this in an accounting perspective.
Okay.
And so there's some industries, and to be honest with you, I don't remember off the top of my head if it's all the industries or just, the courts have limited it to specific industries, but there are definitely specific industries where they're very reluctant to uphold. So there's a non-solicit, which is like, I won't call on you, but they're very hesitant to uphold a non-service. Right. So if you call me, I won't service you.
Interesting.
And so I'm not sure if that pertains to just like all the industries. I'd have to look into the details, but I know that it definitely applies for like accountants is like a good example.
I could see it falling into like the recruiting space.
Well, there's a lot of spaces where it makes sense. So if you think about it, right, if you're an accountant or you're a lawyer or you're a doctor or you're some sort of other professional, and maybe, I don't know if a recruiter falls in or doesn't fall in, but for an accountant, for instance, right? Like I've been doing your accounting work for the last 10 years, right? And I go to some other accounting firm. Maybe I agree that I won't solicit you and say, hey, I'm at this new accounting firm, come with me. Okay, fine. But if you find out that if you call my old accounting firm and you say, hey, I'm looking for Jay,
Yeah.
right? And I say, Jay's not here. And I'm like, well,
where is he? Oh, I'm not telling you.
Well, yeah. Well, A, I'm not telling you. And it's like, all right, well, I don't want you to do my taxes. I want Jay to do my taxes.
That's
right.
exactly
and,
the point.
And that's
there,
like a professional, right? And it's like somebody that like is like a licensed professional. And so I'm like, okay, well, I want Jay to do my taxes. So then I find Jay, right? I call Jay and I'm like, hey, can you do my taxes? And you're like, no. It's like
that's the situation. You hit it right on nail on the head.
Yeah, and the government, not the government necessarily, but courts want to avoid those situations because it's like an absurd situation, right?
Yes.
Like that's like imagine like you went to a doctor your whole life, right?
Yeah,
and you're like, oh, I want to go see my doctor, and they're like, no, you can't.
No, you can't.
Right,
you have to go to this doctor.
You have to go to this other doctor. Yeah. You're like, I don't want to.
Where did my doctor go? I'm not telling you.
Right, and so like you, and then you find your doctor, and the doctor's like, I'm sorry, I can't help you.
I can't help you. Yeah,
right,
that's interesting.
Yeah, so courts typically try to avoid the absurd.
And then there's also a level of common sense too that they would have to just like, accept.
Right. And so that's where that like non-servicing provision
that makes sense.
Becomes kind of like a gray area.
It's like perfectly explained because it's just like it's non-servicing. It's not non-soliciting, it's not non-compete. There's a word for it, right?
Right.
So again, it all goes back to just putting that proper wording in your agreement.
Yeah, and the other thing is, and I tell people all the time, is that courts, when people get confused about the law, think about what would be fair, right?
It's a good question. Yeah, I mean, that's a good response. Yeah.
And it's like, if it's fair, usually for the most part, if it's fair, that's the way the system works.
Yeah.
Or at least it strives to work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then if the result you would get by following this is absurd, or you can like make up an absurd situation like we just did, then it's probably unenforceable.
Yeah. Yeah. So
it's just, and that's the standard for like all sorts of types of agreements.
Gotcha. So out of the office conversation, what's like the most common, like, I guess, non-lawyer, like somebody who's not a lawyer asking you like every day that you're just like, I don't want to have to get asked this question anymore. Like people see lawyers and they're like, oh, like they think, like, I guess like all the secret tricks and to every type of law and every type of situation. Like,
yeah. And lawyers, we focus on certain things and we become like knowledgeable about these things.
Yeah.
And then, a lot of times people just ask me stuff out of left field. Like, what do I do with this immigration form?
Yeah.
Like, what Trump came into office. How's that going to change immigration law? I'm like, I have no idea.
Yeah. They just like think, oh, okay, he's a lawyer, so he can answer.
He knows all the
questions.
stuff, right?
Yeah.
I get like divorce questions. They're like, you do business divorces. I'm like, yes, that's when two shareholders can't agree. But I don't know anything
when you and your wife are having problems.
I don't know anything about that.
Well, I mean, it speaks to, because there's so many different insurance products out there, and I think I bring this up, frequently on the show is a generalist or a master, and like people like in this age dealing with somebody who's a specialist. And I think you've identified some really strategic pieces of the law that make sense for your firm and make sense for the people at your company. But yeah, there's just so many different products, and we live in a day where everybody wants to deal with a professional or a hyper-focused professional.
Yeah, and we strive to be a full-service, small business, outside GC. Yeah. Like you're too small, or you don't have the need to pay somebody to be a full-time GC for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so call us and we're going to, walk through whatever your small business issue might be, whether it's trying to, collect on some debt actually we don't do debt collection.
No debt collection.
Whether it's collect on some agreement that you have, or enforce an agreement that you have, or help you put together agreements, or, disputes among shareholders.
And I'm assuming similar to, I guess, the insurance side of things, I have partnerships or strategic alliances, whatever you want to call them, referral relationships with people who deal with particular products that, we sell, but we're not selling a ton of it, right? Like the health and life product, or even the annuities product. We have good relationships with agents who do that, and that's all they do, Medicare, things like that. So I'm assuming you also have your lawyers that you would reference.
Absolutely.
Debt relief, work, injury law, divorce.
And that's exactly what it is. So if you call us, I like to tell people that we help quarterback the situation, especially for a small business, right? If you call us and the issue you need is an insurance defense lawyer, or is it getting your insurance company involved maybe, or is it a personal injury lawyer, or is it a criminal lawyer, or, a divorce lawyer? I have good relationships with good lawyers that I've seen do great work. And so we get clients to them, and that's kind of how the system's built.
That's awesome. Yeah. All right. So enough law. Well, last thing we'll end on is just outside of the office, goals for 2025 for either you or just your, personal life, things like that.
Personal life goals. I want to travel more.
There you go.
I want to get some more golf in.
There you go.
Now that it's
Yeah.
getting warmer.
Yeah.
What else? Spend time with the family, man.
Yeah. How was the family?
Family's good.
Good. I'm happy to hear that. Yeah, we'll have to get out, play a little golf at Philmont, our club.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of good relationships are created too, organically. I think that the game has allowed me to get 4 hours of undedicated time with somebody. Generally, that's really hard to do outside golf. I don't know.
I spend 4 hours cursing usually.
Yeah. One way or the other.
I'm getting there.
Yeah, that's good. Well, we're going to be wrapping up. Anyone who's listening, Remco Real Talk, if you own, operate a business, you want to share your story, or, if you're just one of those listeners out there who you know Anton, you know myself, you want to get on the show, we'll put the details in the comments below and the bio. So, Anton, this concludes our show. I hope you enjoyed being a guest.
Thanks for spending the time. And if you guys need a call, a lawyer, Kaminsky Law, check us out.
There it is. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.